One of the great gifts of Buddhism that has been for the generation of artists that I've been a part of is to help us to understand what the function of art is in the world we live in. The thing that was appealing about Buddhism was that it was a tradition that went back so long. It was a tradition truly of scholarship, of debate, of thought. You could read people like Nagarjuna from a couple thousand years ago who were wrestling with these questions that were very important for us. And then when you came across people like Wittgenstein, you say, well, what's the big deal? This has been going on for a long, long time. So we began to see that Western philosophy was peaking around the first page of that great, enormous chapter, and suddenly the book was open. When I began very, very slowly to get an understanding of what the Bodhi mind was, of what development of compassion was, and it took me a long time to even know what the words meant. The bottom line was that it had to do with the relationship of the individual to the world they lived in. I think one of the reasons that Buddhism has been so successful in contemporary life is that it's given people a way of relating to their immediate social environment. My personal experience is that it's taken me a very long time to make any headway in this subject, as I felt that true of music too. I felt that I've been a slow learner. The thing I've had on my side was I've had an unbending interest in these subjects, so that my interest, and also I had the gift of discipline and an appetite for working things through. I sometimes would think how envious I would be of some of the teachers I knew who began in the monastery when they were 6. And well, of course, they have no problem meditating. They've been doing it since they were 6 years old. And then at a certain point I realized that I had also been practicing since I was 6, but in a different way. But yet it wasn't that different. For example, the whole relationship to the teacher, to the lineage, to understanding how that works, that happened when I was very young. My first teachers were music teachers. My first first 2 teachers were important music teachers, and my last 2 were, after I had my Dharma teachers, I had my last 2 teachers. So that ushered me into the whole idea of the teacher as being the embodiment of the enlightened mind through which it's possible to get a grasp of the teaching. That was the one thing. The second thing that I learned very quickly, very early, was that practice led to development. It's so obvious, but if you don't, or to put it another way, I'll put it in a simpler way. I could read a book about playing the piano, but after I read the book, I still couldn't play the piano. Someone could say they could play the piano for me, but I still couldn't play the piano. There was only one way to play the piano. I had to sit down and do it myself. That's a lesson which at some point we have to come to grips with that idea in the practice. And I understood that totally by the time I was 10. Once I reached the point of where I began to see my development, that was the great motivation. Once when I practiced, and a few years later I said, oh, I can do something now. I can play a piece that I couldn't play 2 years before I could play, a piece that I couldn't play 3 months before I could play. And that became the great motivation, that the practice It absolutely worked. At the time later on when I began to meet Dharma teachers, and that began when in my early 20s, the whole mechanism of transmission was completely clear to me. I didn't have to question it, I didn't have to think about it, I didn't have to wonder about it. It was something that I knew. Okay. So we're ready, Dan.
Okay.
There were two teachers, two different kinds of teachers. The one teacher was the teacher who teaches you with love. And my first teacher was like that. And I couldn't bear to disappoint him. I couldn't go to my lesson unprepared because it made him so sad. So I was motivated. Then later on I had a teacher who was a completely terrifying teacher. She was a terrifying teacher because she forced me to develop techniques to combat my own mental laziness, which I have plenty of. I still have plenty to this day. I mean, I think she helped, but I mean, that's, of course, the big problem. This is what you're going to do. My first retreats I went to, I asked my teacher whether I could bring my music with him. He said, absolutely. He said to one teacher, once I said to him, by the practice of music, am I limiting my ability to develop the Dharma practice? And though you might say, well, that obviously the answer is no, but it's not obvious. Especially if you're in the middle of it, it's not obvious. In other words, if I spend 12 hours, 10 hours or 12 hours a day doing music, and I spend less time on the other practice, what have I closed some door? I didn't know. Is it a sacrifice that had to be made? And I asked one teacher, he thought about it and he said, I don't know. And I appreciated that answer because I knew what he meant was that this is for you to find out. Well, you can't, what someone else's interior experiences are totally beyond us. I mean, that's why the whole conduct of our personal practice I've considered, it's not private because it's a secret, it's a private because we can't explain it. It's a secret because there's no way to make it known. Music is still a mysterious passage for me. I don't understand any more about it than I did. I had a series of dreams some years ago about music, which told me more about music than my waking states did when I saw music. And I had a series of dreams which I experienced music, not in terms of sound, but in terms of energy. Something that my Dharma teachers had told me, which I didn't understand. One of them said to me, oh, music comes from a different realm. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, it's not from this realm, it comes from a different realm. When we listen to music, we're actually only listening to the surface of the music. That it actually represents something quite different.